Hey, Dr. Sean Price. Back again. We're doing a little video series on hormone function. In the last video, we talked about the adrenal glands, what their function is in the body, how they work, and how they can become overworked. So if you have any questions on that, please go back and watch that first video. But we talked about the hormone pathway and how this ties into it. So again, cholesterol converts into pregnenolone. Now, first of all, you have to have proper cholesterol levels. This is one of a very common issue in the patients that I see that have hormone imbalances, but the adrenals are not the cause. It's usually that their cholesterol is too low, and it's usually because they're on cholesterol lowering medications. So that's something that has to be considered, because cholesterol is necessary for so many functions in the body, and medically the goal is to get cholesterol so low as to supposedly avoid heart conditions, but they're affecting all these other functions. So that's a whole other video series. But cholesterol converts into pregnenolone, which is what we call the mother hormone. Pregnenolone then converts into progesterone, cortisol, estrogen, and testosterone. So let's say that you have a chronic stress situation. Let's say you have a very stressful life, and your adrenal glands are chronically working, so you have elevated levels of cortisol. And let's say that continues for so long that your adrenal glands keep working as hard as they can. They keep trying to function at 100%, but they start to fatigue, and you start having adrenal fatigue. When that happens, your cortisol levels are going to start to drop. So you have low cortisol levels. So if that happens, because cortisol and the adrenal function is a life or death process, it's a life-sustaining process, the body has to have that for that fight or flight response. The low levels of cortisol, the body is going to start robbing the resources from the rest of the hormonal system. It's called a cortisol steal, or some people call it a progesterone steal. And basically what happens is, instead of sending your hormone pathway out here to make your estrogens and your testosterones, instead it siphons to try to get those cortisol levels up. So when you get those cortisol levels lowered, the body will start siphoning those resources to try to get those cortisol levels to elevate back up to normal. And if you're chronically stressing the adrenal glands, you're never going to get that to a normal level, but you're going to have a chronic steal of those resources, which is going to take your estrogen and your testosterone and probably your progesterone and put them out of balance. When that happens, when you run your hormones, you may be said to have low T, or you're estrogen dominant, or you have low estrogen, or your progesterone's not there to oppose the estrogen. There's all these different factors that now come into play because you have hormone imbalance. Then, if you throw on top of it the use of makeups, perfumes, hair care products, all these other products, a lot of them have hormones in them. And when you have hormones in the products, you'll start increasing levels. Let's say that there's estrogen in those products. Let's also say you eat soy because you think that it's a health food, and it's actually an estrogen precursor. They have found that a lot of plastics, if you cook your foods in plastics, or if you reheat them in plastics, or store them in plastics, that can cause an increase in estrogen. You start having these increases in estrogen, but you don't have these other hormones to oppose it, then you start getting into estrogen dominant situations, and you have challenges with things like breast cancer, if it's in the male, prostate cancer, so on and so forth. So you start having multiple factors of issues with that. So the key to this is not getting on bioidentical hormones. When you go onto a bioidentical hormone, it may give you relief in the short term, but you're overriding the safety mechanism that the body has for how many hormones are in the system. And when you do that, you're overriding that system, so now you get increased levels of hormones here. The receptors on the cells will recognize that as a toxin, and over time they're going to start down-regulating their receptors. The bioidentical hormones are going to become less effective, and you're not going to get the relief, and you're overriding your body's system, so your body stops producing its own, so then you get into all kinds of issues with that. And I have a terrible feeling that bioidentical hormones are going to be the next level of cancer-causing agents once they have been doing these long enough to see what the long-term effects are on people. So bioidentical hormones are okay in the short term, like a very short term, to get some relief, and I have patients that are on them when they come in, and we work with them to fix the adrenal glands, handle this stress pathway, and get the body to where it's functioning, make sure the cholesterol levels are normal. And once that happens and the body starts to regulate itself, then you don't need those bioidentical hormones any longer. So that's the basic effect that adrenal fatigue can have on this. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about how do we determine if you have adrenal fatigue. All right?